Hello, everyone. Welcome to the State of AI on Tuesday, the 21st of July. This is a fortnightly webinar that I always do, which basically goes over what's the headlines of AI, what do you need to know about, what's the thought leadership that's going on in the space, all to be able to give you the information that you need to be able to move forward with your AI adoption. And the whole reason that I set this up was because people would always come to me and go, Jamie, where do I find out about all this stuff? Where do I find out what's the changes? How do I keep up to date with what's going on? This is just my way of being able to help people to make sense of this rapidly changing world and landscape, so you have the information that you need to make informed decisions. So our State of AI report, we tend to go through 5 different sections. So our first one is the headline. What's the big thing? If you know nothing else about what happens with AI this month, what would it be? What's moved? So what are we seeing the shifts within the space? What's different between 2025 AI and 2026 AI? Then we start to look at the skills. What's the difference between our workforces? What should be cultivated within our workforces? How can we make sure that people are being equipped with the skills they need to participate in the digital economy? Then we're going to look at the risks and regulations, see any shifts that we're seeing from, be it something like the EU AI Act, where we're starting to see the implementation of these processes, who's affected, how are they affected, everything like that. And then 3 questions that every leader should ask this fortnight as they move into the next couple of weeks. So our headline for this week is essentially we're seeing that more and more that the chatbot interface that most people are used to was the demo. It's not really the product. And what I mean by that is the capabilities that you see within a chatbot interface is not the full capabilities of AI. And that kind of adoption, if your organization is just starting off with its Copilot adoption or its Anthropic adoption, and it's all based on that chatbot interface, it's a good step. It's the first step, but you're also missing out on the much wider picture of what AI can do. If you want to find out more about that and that's of interest to you, of seeing some of those practical capabilities, join us on a webinar next Thursday. We are going to be looking at AI agents using a little Pokemon office to be able to demonstrate the practicalities of how they work, what works for agents, and what kind of things can they do to work for you. So that's the change that you're seeing. So if you were thinking about your current AI usage, a lot of people is they go into a chatbot, they type in what they want, it gets a response, and they keep this kind of back and forth until they get the response that they want. Very 2025. If you look at the adoption bit of AI agents, that's going to change from you having to interact with it all the time to what are these agents that work in the background of our organization? Not like chatbots, but more like employees, more like people, more like things that are actually capable of completing tasks. So yeah, we're beginning to see adoptions really kind of taking up within the space when it comes to AI. 29% of Fortune 500 companies now have live paying customers utilizing that in their organizations. The divide is now between the teams with chat and those who are utilizing AI agents. So that's the big shift. Check out next Thursday if you want to see the practicalities of what that looks like. What's moved? What's been our shifts, our movers and the shakers? So what we're seeing is enterprise adoption has gone from pilots to production. Lots of organizations now are starting to be able to take their use cases, they're applying AI to problem statements. And it's really funny to see, because if I think to 2 years ago, every webinar was, well, how does this have any practical application within our organization? How does AI have any practical application within our organization? And now people are beginning to go from that piloting and testing it to going, this is where it fits in as part of our workflow. This is where it fits in as part of our processes. And every organization is utilizing AI to be competitive in the market that it's operating in. So we've gone from this stage of, okay, we need to be able to experiment, to go, okay, we're starting to develop some things and implement it within our organizations. I still think SMEs are far ahead of the adoption curve than larger organizations. Anytime I work with a big corporate, I tell them, your competitors, they're not the people that you need to worry about, okay? Your competitors have access to the exactly same tools. They're probably using them in the exact same way. You're not further ahead than them. You're not further behind than them. What you need to be careful of is 5 people and a dog, okay? Because smaller teams, smaller enterprises that are set up, they're AI native, they utilize AI to fill the capacity in the work that they haven't got, and they're not so much of a behemoth, a lumbering dinosaur to be able to kind of get around AI adoption. They are the organizations that I would be fearful of if you were a large organization, because they're able to move much faster. They have less bottlenecks, they have less approval processes to be able to get things in. So essentially, they are able to ship things a lot quicker, and they are able to fill up their capacity a lot quicker utilizing AI agents as well without any of the bottlenecks. Which leads us on to our second point, which is the agent bottleneck is your content and not the model. So if we were looking at AI models, 7-8 months ago, you'd go, it's good, but it's not quite good enough. Like it's all right, it's getting there, but it doesn't quite achieve the results that we're looking for. Now the models are really kind of plateauing in some ways. Like the difference between an open source model from China and your frontier models at the beginning of this year was 2.7% between the best and the best. So the differences between the models, yes, there are some point differences, but that gap is closing significantly. And therefore the challenge becomes the information that you're giving it. The biggest challenge for organizations is the documentation of their processes, that is the details that they have coming through, that's feeding the AI, the context, the data richness, and the capability of that data. Because ultimately, it's the old. I would think of AI agents similar to how you've got in your organization. If you give people really bad onboarding and you give them really bad data to work from, and you don't give them the information they need in a timely manner, then you're never going to get the results from them that you're looking for. And the same thing happens with AI. You end up in a situation where you're just you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And that's why most organizations probably don't see the ROI that they are expecting from it. Right. AI business case has been flipped from growth to cuts. So if you were looking at how people talked about 2025 AI, it was all about replacing jobs. How do we get it so it's going to be in a situation where we are, able to get rid of the customer service team because we're going to replace them all with AI agents, which is very short-sighted thinking. It showed a fundamental lack of understanding around how AI works, the capabilities of it, where it's at versus where it's going. However, if you're looking to 2026 and you're looking to the year ahead, what you're looking at is more about not looking at how do we cut teams, but how do we use this to grow the organization? How do we make this investment so we're getting more out of the people that we have in-house, and that we're getting more out of the organization, and that we're able to augment human capability to be able to bring in more support, be able to achieve more things. So it's gone from cutting headcount to how do we build capacity, which is a much better way and a much more useful use of AI. Most organizations that cut people in order to be able to implement AI and just got rid of teams in order to do that, they are now hiring back those same teams. So they haven't really achieved anything. When we're looking at our next point here, which is that humans have become, it kind of ties in nicely from what we were just moving from, but humans are now the project managers of AI. They're essentially, everybody has a team of AI that's working under them, or at least they soon will be. And essentially that means that they kind of moved into this project manager role, where essentially they are making sure that they are able to work through these specific checkpoints, and they are the human in the loop for making sure that you're getting the results that you're looking at. So it's more of a coordination role than it is being able to go, I'm going to get every task done, or I'm going to get every AI task. I'm going to supervise it as it does every task. I'm now checking at particular points of the process to check that it's on track. So that is a shift that we have seen within the last 6 months or so. The skills gap. So much more people utilizing AI in a coaching fashion rather than just as an answer machine. So it's not the equivalent of a Google search, right? It's not a case of looking at a bunch of symptoms online and being able to find Google to get WebDoc to give you the answer. People are utilizing it much more in a fashion that is around developing thinking. It is around being able to question your own thinking, challenge you, tutor you, give you information that you didn't have before. So it becomes this interactive piece that is now utilizing it as a a coaching platform, and from a learning point of view, it's almost like this interactive learning. So it's another part of, if you're part of your L&D strategy for your delivery, should be around how do we utilize AI as a meaningful coach without it turning into something that's sycophantic and just, telling you everything's a great idea. How do you actually utilize it to learn, to develop, to question your thinking, rather than to be able to provide you with easy answers and lower that friction to learning, when actually you want it sometimes to be able to increase that friction to learning. So in the past, it was you ask, you get an answer, you paste it into your document or whatever it might be. Now, when you're looking at AI as a coach, you ask, it pushes back, it challenges, and that should enhance the way that you think about things. So it's about developing rather than just giving you the answers. Let me just check. If anyone has any questions along the way, feel free to go and put them in the comments. Let us know, and we'll answer them as we go through as well. 80-20, I think this is a really good rule for anyone who is utilizing AI. Is AI, and this has been the case ever since the inception, really, and the commercialization of AI, is AI gets you 80% of the way there really quickly. The last 20% is always human oversight. We cannot overstate this enough. Critical thinking, curiosity, collaboration, communication, creativity, these are all human-centric skills. That is the thinking that you bring to the table. It is important that you do continue to bring it to the table. Otherwise, you might as well just have a machine doing your job. Okay. And this is where we want to leverage human thinking. We want to leverage human-centric skills that are hard for AIs to be able to replicate. So therefore, it might get you 80% of the way there really quickly, but don't underestimate the 20% that still needs the human oversight, the human in the loop, in order to go and achieve those results. That's fact checking, that's nuance, that's brand voice. You have subjective experiences. AI does not. You understand why a change project failed in your organization 5 years ago. The AI does not. Make sure that you are bringing that insight to the table, because that is the most valuable skills that you have in a digital economy. So this is where we go back to being a product manager and not just a proofreader. If you're spending all of your time bot sitting, which is basically waiting for it to be able to come up with an answer, check through, you're missing the key aspects of it saving you time. You might be getting time back from being able to get it to do a task, but you're spending more time on the checks with it. So one of the things that you want to look at over the next few weeks is being able to go, we need to have essentially sprints and design check-ins. You want to be able to get your AIs to be able to get to a certain page, a certain start of it, and then being able to check through it, rather than having to check through every single step by step. The AI models that we have today are more capable than they were. They're better at being able to citate what they're doing. It's easier to be able to understand how it's come up with the decision that it's got. What you want to do is make sure you're just building in your sprints along the way and your design check-ins as you go through. So that's how you can get the most out of your AI models. So you draft, you write the test, and then you reflect as you go through. It's a refractor model as we work through. Next, we're looking at regulation. So one of the things that I am noticing more and more, particularly as someone who started talking about AI in 2015, is the regulation always arrives too late. And what I mean by this is, when I started talking about AI in 2015, it was about how is this going to change the shape of the economy, and how do we protect people? How do we prepare people for that future? And what can we do now in order to make sure they're prepared for the moment that we have these AI capabilities? And at the time, everybody goes, well, yeah, I'm sure it's important, but actually, because they can't see the technology in front of them, because they can't see the impact hitting them today, it's like, well, that sounds like tomorrow's job. That sounds like someone else's job in 5 years' time. And the problem is with that is, now when things land on the table and you're trying to react to them, you're doing things reactively rather than proactively. You have to look at these things, particularly with the escalation of these technologies and how quickly they are improving. You have to be thinking 5-10 years out and skilling people for that workforce that they're going into. I always use the example of going from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution. Over the space of 50 years, you went from having 80% of people in agriculture jobs, to it being less than 10% in the space of 50 years. And that means you had to skill people, train people, give the education for them to participate in the world that they're going into. We are escalating that quickly when it comes to AI models. I suppose I would also use the example of when we went from the first flight to landing on the moon. The first airplane flight, and between the first airplane flight and landing on the moon was 66 years. Okay. If you're thinking about that technological advancement in the 90s with, where we were coming from that perspective, and think about AI production, you're looking at the same leaps and bounds, but you're talking about a much shorter time frame. So you have to regulate for the technology, not as it exists today, but how it's going to exist in the future. And your organization needs to prepare its AI strategy, not reactive to what's happening on right now, but to the kind of organization that it wants to be in 10 years' time. And the organizations that are able to have that foresight, they're going to be the organizations that are still going to be there. The ones that are constantly reactive, they are going to be the ones that disappear. AI-powered attacks now target enterprise identity. So one of the challenges with having AI getting so good at coding, so capable of being able to do things, is malicious actors can have a tool here that allows them to be malicious a lot quicker without having to have the expertise or oversight that they once previously had. So in the past, it would have taken someone who was a very proficient user of technology, understanding coding, understanding systems in order to be able to break into a system. Nowadays, you just have to be able to be persistent enough with the tools that you have. A good example of this was, I can't remember the Hoover make, but they had little Roomba style Hoovers. And essentially as part of that, they had cameras that were operated in part of the Hoovers. And one guy was like, you know what, I'd love to be able to go into my cameras to use them as part of another project. And as he's tried to find a backdoor into his Hoover's camera, he's actually found a backdoor into everybody's Hoover's camera. And that means that every camera that was accessible to him for every other unit was there. And that was because the AI was able to find the backdoor. It found it for his one, but it also found it for every product on the market. And this is where security has to be tight. You have to be very mindful of the data you have, how it's protected, how it's being utilized, because that will make a difference to how people can utilize AI and what they can get access to. One of the best things that you need to be able to do is harden your identity, do security checks, and get AIs to do a security check on your system as well, because they are going to be able to see the security flaws in what you have and help you be able to fix them. So yeah, AI fluency is going to be a massive challenge within your workforce at the moment. I would think to this, I always think to like when I started in the workplace, there were still people in the workforce that were like, I'm not a computer person. I don't do the computers. I don't do emails. That's not the kind of manager that I am. And obviously over time you can't afford to be someone who goes, actually, I'm just not going to use the technology. I'm not that kind of manager. I'm not that kind of, I don't do the tech stuff. I do bring other things to the table. But the difference is that those people who never learned to adopt the technology, that became a barrier for them, and it becomes a barrier to the progression. It becomes a barrier to success. You can't really afford to not be a computer person in the modern age. And the same thing's happening from an AI perspective. If you're going, oh, we've got some AI champions, but we haven't got some people, we've got people that aren't really interested in using it. That's fine. I can understand why people have barriers to it and stuff like that, but it is dividing your workforce into the cans and the can'ts. Because the people who are able to utilize the technology are able to do significantly more with their output than those who can't. And that is going to be a differentiator when it comes to a lot of organizations. So you want to think about, how do you bring people on the journey? People have some really legitimate reasons for not wanting to utilize AI. And I think that it's really important to start with listening to those voices, figure out what they're worried about, what they're scared about within your organization. There's good reasons behind it. And you need to address those concerns, from a balanced point of view, but to be able to make sure that everybody understands the impact that it's going to have in your workforce and how you can support them through that. So something to be mindful of as we kind of see this gap emerging between those who are AI literate and those who can't. So 3 questions I'd be asking as a leader over this next fortnight. So are our teams live in chat box? What would help move them to agents to do that work? So essentially, if your organization is just coming up with the start of its adoption and it's just on that kind of chat box interface, you have to recognize that that is the first step, but it's not the final step. Agents is essentially going to be like managing a team that you have, and some of those are going to be made up of humans, and some of those are going to be made up of AI agents. If you're interested in this question more and you really want to be able to dig into it, I highly recommend come along to Thursday's webinar. We are going to be looking at this from a very visual point of view of how AI agents are becoming essentially extensions of your team. And that will help you start to look at what the next 2 or 3 years are going to look like. Next question is, before we buy more AI, is our content and data usable enough for an AI agent? And what I mean by that is AI agents run on processes, they run on context, they run on your organization's understanding. What you need to be able to do is make sure that the information that you have is well documented, that it is well understood, that the context is available, because that's going to be the difference between getting an AI agent that's going to be able to perform well for you and one that is not going to perform as easily as you would like it to. So come back to what's our data like, what's our content like, what's our structure like, because AI agents, they work well within a structure, but if it's all chaotic, they're not going to be as effective for you as you want them to be. We keep waiting for clearer regulation. What should we govern ourselves on now without waiting? So if you keep waiting for regulation to come down from above or from governments to be able to do so, that might serve for the moment, for the time that you're in, but it's also not going to serve you in the long haul. So what we want to be able to really do is think about, as we move into the future, as you move into the future of work, what things do you need to put in place for your organization right now in order to be able to serve you for the future? So that's our third question for this week. So I'll see you all in a fortnight. We will be looking at the updates that have been from the next couple of weeks there. As I said, we've got Thursday session, which is going to be explaining how AI agents work using a Pokemon 8-bit interface. I'll show you a little bit about what we're going to be playing with. So this is our little agent office over here. So we will be looking at the practicalities of being able to use an office like this as we start to kind of move into some of how AI agents work and how we get the most out of them. So we will have a play with that and go through in a lot more detail how that impacts vibe coding, how that impacts your organization and the completion of tasks. So hopefully that'll be useful for your future as we start to look into that. If anyone has any questions, wants to reach out, wants more information, please don't hesitate to do so. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on every social channel that you can think of. Jamie Bykov-Brett. Feel free to reach out and we'll see what we can do to help. And if you're looking for help with your strategy, with training, with transformation, then I would love to be able to have that conversation with you about that as well. So once again, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you all in a fortnight's time.